August 30th, 2018, San Francisco. The Sales Development Conference. The first and only live conference 100% focused and dedicated to sales development. Join over 300 of the top minds in sales development for a full day of learning, forging new relationships, and creating the next generation of sales development excellence. This year, we have dedicated tracks for sales development leadership, as well as a track for individual sales development representatives, including a full day of ultra-useful hands-on training. Bring your whole team to get the tools, research, and connections you need to accelerate your career and push your sales development program forward. Accelerate your growth at the Sales Development Conference 2018. Go to tenbound.com/conference to get your tickets today. That's tenbound.com/conference. You're listening to the Sales Development Podcast, the only audio forum focused and dedicated 100% to sales development. If you care about growing your skills and getting more new sales appointments, pipeline, and closed-won deals, you came to the right place. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, iTunes, or Spreaker, and be sure to go back and listen to all the episodes for the best strategies, tips, and tactics out there on running a high-performance sales development program. And now, your host, founder, and CEO of Tenbound at tenbound.com, David Delaney.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. I'm David Delaney, your host, with my esteemed guest, a good friend of Chad Burmeister, so he must be an amazing person. This is Mr. Scott King, Director of Pipeline Development with Zimperium. How you doing today, Scott?
I'm doing great, David. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm honored to have you on this show as a fan of your podcast. If folks have not checked out your podcast, I believe it's thescottking.com, right, where they can check it out?
Yeah, thescottking.com, and most of my tags are thescottking, so Twitter at thescottking, and all my usernames. So pretty much if you type that in to Google, you'll find all my stuff.
Yeah, and it's like a treasure trove of information. Definitely. I want to introduce you and tell people about it, but I'll put that in the show notes as well. So as people, as they learn more about you, they can listen to some of those episodes because there's a great deal of information. But Scott, you're the Director of Pipeline Development. How did you build your career to that point? If people don't know about you, give us the quick download on Scott King.
How I built my career into pipeline development? Well, that's interesting. I'm not actually sure. The first technology sales job I ever had was at a company in Dallas called i2 Technologies, and we sold supply chain software and decision-making software. And my first job was, as an inside sales rep, right? And I was calling into Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana territory, calling into COOs and CEOs and CFOs talking about supply chain. And I just got it. I guess I was just really good at it. This was pretty much before the internet, right? It was before definitely all the online resources that we have now, right? There was no LinkedIn. There was no Twitter. I think we had OneSource. And it's basically like a predecessor to Hoover's, I think.
I remember that. Yep.
Yeah. So we used OneSource, and we read 10K reports and 10Q reports, and we were looking for nuggets, and we called about, public information. So got really good at that and was just, always on the phone, always used to talking to somebody that I couldn't see. And, throughout the years, I had different technology sales jobs. And then I got a job at a startup in Dallas called ITKO. And I was basically answering questions from the website, right? We were trying to learn how we were going to market and learn what all of our visitors wanted to hear from us. And I basically, since I talked to so many people, I knew all the answers to all the frequently asked questions and, just became really, really good at pitching it. I was pitching it 1, 2, 3 times a day at least, and just got really, really good until the CEO, who is a good friend of mine, Sridhar Mittal, he's the CEO also over here at Zimperium. And he said, "Hey, you're really good at all the, this early stuff. Would you mind being in marketing? I need some marketing help. Would you mind helping out the marketing team? Because you just get it, it's easy for you." So I said, sure. And that's basically how I got into marketing. Sridhar asked me to. So I said, yes. And I'm still here.
I love it. I love it. I think to be a good salesperson, you have to be a good marketer, and to be a good marketer, you have to be a good salesperson. So, you came through the ranks and you developed your skills, and now you got into marketing. And as you have developed your career and looked at the relationship with the sales development team, the big burning question in our community is, where should sales development sit? And, what has been your experience in working with sales development, from a marketing perspective?
So you mean where should they sit in an organization? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it could be where do they sit in the office? You could put them in the closet or something like that. But no, I'm just kidding. It's, from an org chart perspective, should they report to marketing? Should they report to sales? Where should they be on that org chart?
I don't think it really matters that much because, in my view, everyone is in sales. The CEO is in sales. All the marketing people are in sales. The salespeople obviously are in sales. But I think the people that actually help you develop and service the product, they're also in sales, right? Especially with SaaS, with all the retention numbers that we need to pay attention to. A developer fixing a bug, that's a customer service issue. He's in sales, right? He's making happy customers. So one, I would say that the sales development, they are a sales team. And then, and I think they're also a marketing team. So I've seen them report back to both, right? So we have a small sales development team here at Zimperium. They sit in marketing, right? They sit right near me. And, they hear all the chatter, but, I think from an overall perspective, I really don't think it does matter one way or the other. I think it just needs to make sure that, their role and in the whole sales cycle just needs to be defined so, they can be clear on how to achieve success. So however they're going to be most successful, I would say put them there.
Got it. Okay. That's really interesting. So if you look at the organization, the usual organization is still set up in a way that it was 10, 20 years ago in a lot of respects. But yet the way that we sell, especially with software as a service, has changed quite a bit. So, what are your thoughts on the organization? Should we just erase the whiteboard and start over to be more in tune with the way that we're selling and the customers, or I guess just kind of continue to morph it the way that we're doing right now?
Really my answer would depend on the price of your product. With lower end products, there's probably not, a sales development function. It's just the sales guy. And, it's all phone and internet based. Whereas if you have higher ticket items, once you move into software or services that's over $100,000, that is a big complicated process, right? Those sales cycles are anywhere from, 9 to 24 months, I'm thinking. And so I think, from that perspective, it depends on how it's priced. If you look at the bigger software companies, your SAP, Oracle, CA Technologies, BMC, they have expensive products, right? And long sales cycles. Their sales development teams typically are, setting appointments or answering web traffic. Whereas you look at, some online services, I'm thinking of website little widgets like Drift or something that you can buy. I'm sure they don't even have a sales development function. I'm not sure, but I would imagine that maybe they use kind of a round robin sales process or some type of geography based sales process where, you are your own SDR. So I think it depends.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Cause I think about how, for example, Slack, came on the scene a few years ago and suddenly everyone was using Slack, and it was like product led, marketing versus something where you have to go out and actually explain what it is and get people to do a trial and kind of handhold them through that process. It's a completely different thing. So I would assume, like a Drift or Slack probably doesn't have a sales development team, but who knows? If anybody from those companies is listening, leave it in the comments, and I'd be curious to see. Because I remember a couple years ago, inbound marketing was the big thing, and HubSpot was leading the charge on inbound marketing. And someone came to me and said, you know who has one of the most sophisticated outbound programs in the SaaS world is HubSpot. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. I thought that, they could just sit back and get leads all day, but I guess not.
Yeah, that may be a good way to delineate what I was talking about earlier. One, if I can go to your website and I can try it without talking to someone, I think that's a different process. And then secondly, if I go to your website and I need to talk to someone to install a trial or start a proof of concept, then that kind of puts you into that longer sales cycle, right? Because if you want to talk to me to try it, that means probably that, I need some type of cloud access or VPN for you to give me the product or, some type of configuration so I can use it in my own environment. And that leads to a more complex sale. So, maybe let's just say whether or not I can try it by myself.
August 30th, 2018, San Francisco. The Sales Development Conference. The first and only live conference 100% focused and dedicated to sales development. Join over 300 of the top minds in sales development for a full day of learning, forging new relationships, and creating the next generation of sales development excellence. This year, we have dedicated tracks for sales development leadership, as well as a track for individual sales development representatives, including a full day of ultra-useful hands-on training. Bring your whole team to get the tools, research, and connections you need to accelerate your career and push your sales development program forward. Accelerate your growth at the Sales Development Conference 2018. Go to tenbound.com/conference to get your tickets today. That's tenbound.com/conference.
Yeah, exactly. That totally makes sense. And let me ask you something that I'm curious about from a marketing perspective, just to kind of switch gears, is it seems like it's getting harder and harder to get the message out. And these companies like some of those, Slack or Drift, they take off virally, but other companies really struggle and sometimes even go out of business. From a marketing perspective, are there 2 or 3 things that you see in your practice that are really working to, be able to communicate with people? And the reason I bring this up is it seems like there's almost a war for attention going on, and people's attention spans are becoming shorter and shorter, and it's just harder to kind of get in front of people with a message.
Yeah, you said a couple of things. So one, it's harder to get the message out. I would say it's easier to get the message out, which is why, which is the cause of our attention spans, right? We just get too much information thrown at us, so we just ignore everything. So I think really what you mean is, how do I grab somebody's attention, right? Because it's easy to send an automated message, right? And we get automated messages, and a lot of them are really, really poor, right? You can tell that they don't know who they're talking to. Examples that I think of recently, I'll put something out on LinkedIn or Twitter, and 2 days later, I'll get an automated email that says, "Hey, by the way, did you see this news?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did, because I actually tweeted it 2 days ago," right? They have no idea who I am. Or I was on a support call yesterday with AT&T, and I was trying, since I'm remodeling my house, I wanted to move like my internet and TV service. Well, my internet service asked me who I use for TV. I said, well, I use DirecTV. And so then I had to go talk to the DirecTV person. They're like, hey, who do you use for internet service? And I'm like, I use you guys. Hey, where's your cell service? I'm like, it's with you guys. I'm like, I am like the stuck customer, and you guys have no idea who I am. So I think what happens is everything is so complex, which is what we fight against, right? We're fighting against all the complexity. And then I have all these automation pieces that it's very easy to send out messages. It's very difficult to tailor it to a specific person, which is where a SDR comes in, right? Some of the best things that we've seen is, if I can create a message for a specific person in a specific situation that is completely tailored to, his current environment and maybe his project, that is the best use of time. Yeah, maybe I get 1 or 2 of those out in a day, but, I'm very effective, right? A lion only needs to catch, one buffalo every once in a while, but he's stalking the buffalo and he's using his team and using the pride to kind of hunt, and then they kill, and then they don't have to eat for a while, right?
Yes.
Whereas, somebody that's foraging all the time and they're just looking under rocks, frantically because they don't know where their next meal comes from. I think that's kind of the delineation. So I would say just, success is, make it relevant, but a lot of teams maybe put too much pressure on growth, and that you can't be that tailored all the time. So I think it's kind of a chicken and the egg.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a push-pull out there in the sales development community because the prototype was what Salesforce did with their sales development team, and the book came out, Predictable Revenue, and it's like kind of based on a large number of activities happening, and then those activities converting into appointments and revenue, and people are still trying to run it in a way that worked maybe 15 years ago. But because of all the new technologies that you mentioned, there's just this huge number of messages that are going out that are not tailored, and it becomes noise, right? And so I think there's like a transition period happening right now where people realize that they have to do personalization and tailor the message and have it be at the right time to the right person and things like that. But yet the management systems of sales development haven't figured out how to optimize to that. And so the default is just mass messaging, and it keeps going on and on. It's a weird transition period right now, it seems.
Yeah, and it may just be, who is managing the group, right? So Aaron Ross talks in Predictable Revenue about sales role specialization. And I think people just need to break it down into parts, like how do people actually buy this, and where are the bottlenecks and where do they get stuck? So just put people there, right? So if they don't get stuck at trialing the product, don't have people convincing people to try the product, right? They get stuck later on the cycle. And maybe Aaron was at Salesforce like early 2000s, 2005, something like that. And maybe that's like the age of all the managers now, right? They're still doing it the old way. Because if you grew up doing it that way and you didn't have to really use all the online tools, like you still think that, hey, I need you to make 65 dials today because that's what works. And, if you look at any voicemail return, right, it's like less than 1%. But I think you just need to get it through your minds that leaving a voicemail is okay. Just don't expect, a return call, because basically you're giving someone homework. Like, don't call them and ask them to call you back. Just maybe call them and give them some information. Like, hey, I've got a webinar presentation. I would love for your team to check it out. Here it is, right? Just leave it at that. Like, you can do that 65 times a day pretty easily. Yeah,
totally. And probably because of my business, I help SDR teams, to get up to speed. And so I see all the negative out there. But I mean, the number one thing that I see is the SDRs, like, they have all these tools and all this stuff to support them, but they're just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm getting all these different messages. I got all these tools. I'm just kind of struggling here to get some traction and set up appointments. And my boss wants, 8 appointments qualified each month, or 10 or 20, a number that somebody made up. So they're really struggling as well. They're kind of getting it from both ends. The prospects are inundated with information, and the management is pushing them for, activities versus, what you're talking about, which might actually work, which is, personalization and tailoring. So.
Yeah, I think, when the SDRs, when they don't know what's going on and they're stuck and maybe they're confused at the steps, it's because they don't really understand the whole journey, right? It's kind of like cooking. So I can read a recipe and understand the steps, but unless I do it, I don't really understand the entire journey. And I always take it back to the first time I tried to roll sushi. So I followed the recipe and I got I cooked my rice and I started rolling all these sushi rolls, and it was a nightmare, right? I just didn't realize how sticky the rice was. And I didn't know all of the problems that I was going to have. It stuck to the knife, right? So like each slice of the roll, it was just like tearing it, right? And it was all over my hands. It was all over the kitchen, but it didn't say anything like that in the recipe book. Now, the second time I did sushi, I wet the knife, I wet my hands, I had slick surfaces. It was, over 100% faster and over 100% more effective, right? Because I understood the whole journey, I understood the problems. And I think a lot of times we ask the SDR or inside salespeople to do something, and basically they just want validation that they're in the right spot, that they're doing the right things. And I think you just need to take a step back and invest time in those resources, because think about it, that's the first touch from your company into a new customer. So it needs to be pretty polished, and I don't really think a lot of people think of it that way.
So, going off that analogy, what is a way that an SDR, they're in a narrow function, they're trying to get appointments with people and they're under all this pressure. What are one or two ways that they could, get the whole recipe of the sushi and understand the bigger picture of how they fit in and, do that themselves, because they're usually not getting a lot of support from other people and they got to kind of figure it out themselves?
I think, one, you said they're not getting a lot of support from people. Go put them in the support organization. If you already have customers, don't even train them. Just go put them in support and have them answer support calls or support emails, right? If they understand what's coming in, hey, I'm having a problem with this, or, I'm trying to solve this issue. Like, one, they're learning the product, and then two, they're learning what the customers are actually doing with the product, and three, they're building an arsenal of stories that they can tell on the front end, right? So when they call into a company and, they're talking about a specific situation, and they say, hey, I talked to a customer, he had this exact situation, here's how they were solving it, right? So I think put them in the support organization, because one, if you have customers, then those need to be acted upon pretty quickly, and it teaches everybody at the same time. And then they understand the whole journey. They're like, oh, okay, our customers are solving this problem with our product or service, and if I call on the front end, like, now I can close the loop, and now I kind of get it.
Yes. And, I love that idea. That's spot on. What I'm kind of thinking is that people need pipeline. They need appointments for their sales team. They might have hired the sales team first and then thought about, oh, we've got to get some pipeline and some appointments. So let's hire SDRs and start demand gen. And there's a rush. There's a rush. We got to get them in. We got to get them up to speed. We got to get them on the phone. Start making 100 calls. It's very rushed. And what I'm hearing, what you're suggesting is, hey, let's slow the F down here. First and foremost, we're setting people up for failure if they don't talk to your customers, if they don't know anything about what they're doing, if they can't see the big picture. Let's slow it down a little bit so we have that education process first and not put so much pressure on them from the get-go, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, I think it depends on your product, right? Because it may not be that you have to go that slow, but you really do need to invest, because those guys they're spending 100% of their time to help a guy that probably makes, 3 or 4 times the salary in terms of a direct salesperson, that, he needs pipeline. So you need to do whatever, is possible to help him. But, 100% of your job is just, use the phone and get appointments. And, anybody that's done that for some number of time, it's a pretty tough job. I mean, you get beat up all the time. It takes a specific, type of character to, to receive the negativity and kind of the punishment, right? But the amount that you learn in talking to that many people is, is probably like 2x, 3x the actual time that you've invested, right? You can learn 3 months or of material in a month. So I think it depends on the speed.
Yeah. It does. And it also makes me think it's being careful in the recruiting process, because another thing I see a lot is it's like, hey, we got to spin up a SDR team. Let's recruit a bunch of people, get them in the seat, just accelerate that whole process. But if you take a step back and you look at it that, we're really investing in the future of the company here, and this person could, like your example, Scott, I mean, they could do the SDR job for a while, get into sales, get into marketing, rise up, be around for quite a few years, but you got to get the right person at the upfront.
Yeah, I think you do have to get the right person, and I think people weed themselves out pretty quickly. They're like, wow, this is much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And then if they're good, they know they're good, and they want to get out of that function pretty quick because they see the type of value that they're delivering to the sales team. They're like, hey, I want to be on the other side of this equation, and I want to have somebody like me helping me. But a lot of times what happens is, when they move from SDR to sales, they don't get another SDR as good as they were, right? So, it's just work, and these companies are big, especially the companies that I've dealt with. And I think it just, you always want to have the best talent, right? And just to retain and kind of train that talent. So I think recruiting is a big portion, but a lot of SDRs, they're picked right out of college or right after their first sales job, and they're just there's a lot of potential. So I think you just like you said earlier, you gotta invest.
Yeah, definitely, and it's one byproduct of the SDR movement and all the stuff that's been going on is that a lot of account executives don't want to prospect anymore when they get out of the SDR organization. They're just like, dude, I did that for 2 years. Like, I never want to make another cold call again. But it's kind of, you're shooting yourself in the foot, because even if you become an account executive, you still have to consistently prospect. I mean, there's no surrender on the day that you get promoted, because if you're leaving that to just the SDR, then I think you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, I mean, you need to look at the entire value chain. Like, some people or some salespeople may be fortunate enough not to have to do that because they're in a situation where they got a couple of big accounts and they can grow that, and basically they're prospecting by default by going laterally in an organization. But if you're trying to open new accounts all the time, then those guys are hungry and they're smart. They'll always prospect. If you find a salesperson not prospecting, then I think maybe you got like a misalignment, let's call it.
Yeah, they're probably not going to be a salesperson for that long. That's a really good point. Well, Scott, this has been really interesting, and I appreciate your take on the function. And again, we'll put your podcast in the show notes. Should people just go to thescottking.com to learn more about you, or is there other resources?
Yeah, that's probably the best spot is thescottking.com. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can reach out to me there, and I'll answer any questions that come my way.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on the show, and thanks for all the input.
Hey, thanks a lot, David.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Development Podcast, the only audio forum 100% focused and dedicated to sales development, with your host, David Delaney. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube and take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes. Your support makes our show possible. If you are struggling with your sales development program, contact us at tenbound.com for a no-obligation exploratory call. Again, that's tenbound.com.